Hey y'all, it's your fellow human being, Leo here. Just wanted to do a simple tip video on how to create a polyphonic sample arrangement using time and pitch shifting to achieve it. So the first thing is, what does polyphonic mean? Polyphonic is just a term that simply means you have multiple melody lines that are playing at the same time to kind of create a more complex sounding arrangement. Obviously, we're going to be messing around with two things, right? Melodies and harmonies in this case, because samples can include both melodies and harmonies. But the key idea is, in this case, we're going to be using the same sample and creating duplicate copies and using manipulations on those duplicate copies to create a more complex arrangement. So right now I have a sample arrangement made from a sample that my dear friend Tonfram has given me. And this is the piano arrangement that he's still working on, but he sent me a snippet of via WhatsApp. So I decided, hey, I want to mess around with this and try to create something that I could turn into a beat later. So here's what it sounds like by default. So after you create your sample loop arrangement and you decide, hey, I want to create something a bit more interesting, the first step that you're going to probably be doing is duplicating the track. So I have two copies.
3FX bypassed FP220, 2FP122.
So I have FP1, that's the original track. We're not going to do anything to it yet. We're going to mainly focus on the second track, which is called
3FX bypassed FP222
FP2. And before we move any further, I also wanted to mention that I pan my tracks off to the sides, FP1 on the left, FP2 on the right, just to create space for our melody tracks as we go forward, as well as not having a buildup of frequencies in the center. So what we're first going to explore is time shifting. There's probably other names for it, but I'm just going to call it time shifting just to keep it simple. And what I mean by this is we're going to take this arrangement or these items on this track, this FP2 track, and we're going to change the initial start time around. So we're going to mess around with taking all these items. We're going to hit Alt Control A or Option Command A.
22 items selected.
And I'm going to cut these.
22 items removed.
And what I'm going to do is mess around by first moving the start time back.
Beat 2. 22 items added.
So I moved it back one beat, and we're going to see what happens.
Beat.
So in listening to this, you can kind of just get the feel that, oh, that's just a simple, like it's just me kind of creating a delay without me using a delay plugin. And that's the basic idea of this. It's one way that you can kind of create a delay without needing to use a delay. As you can kind of tell, if you move it back a beat, it means that the delay is going to be longer. But let's just mess around with just moving it back a half a beat.
50%.
Or an eighth note, sorry. So there's probably some things I would need to clean up in the last half of this 8-bar loop, but that's one way that you can do time shifting, is you can just copy the items and shift the item or loop back a bar or beat or whatever you need to kind of create a more interesting polyphonic arrangement. But another thing that I do for time shifting is I would take this, I'm going to move these items back to the beginning so they're starting at the same time. And what I'm going to do is delete one of the items typically I just delete the first item at the beginning of the track. Typically I kind of keep them to be of the same grid length. So what I mean by that is if I chop up a loop and I'm chopping them up alongside a grid division, then typically I would just chop them up to be of equal length. So in this case, I set my grid to be of half notes, and I just chop up my loop to be half note sized items. So to set your timeline grid, you would just hit Control+Shift in the top number row, in this case Control+Shift+2 for half notes, and then look for an action in the actions list called Split Item by Timeline Grid to split items by grid division. Make sure you have ripple per track mode on. And what that means is in Reaper, whenever you're going to move items around, if you have ripple per track mode on, then every time there's a movement on a track, it will move other items out of the way or earlier in the timeline based on what you cut and paste around. And to make sure you're in the correct ripple mode, you can just hit Control+Shift+P.
Ripple per dash track.
And it will tell you what mode you're currently in. And you can just hit Alt+Shift+P to toggle between different ripple modes. So ripple per track.
Ripple all tracks.
Ripple all tracks.
Ripple off.
Ripple off. So in this case, we're going to delete an item and it's going to move all the items on that track earlier.
One face.
So here we go. I like how, so here's what's happening is you're going to get the delay effect in reverse. You're going to get the same time delay effect, but the original item is going to be doing the echoing as opposed to the FP2 track. So that's the other cool thing that you can think about. And we're going to move on to the second part of this tutorial. So we did time shifting and how you can mess around with creating in a more complex arrangement using time, but now we're also going to incorporate pitch in that. So we're going to take this second track and shift the pitch to be different.
21 items selected.
So I selected all the items by hitting Alt Control A again, and I'm going to hit Shift 0 to move the pitch up by a semitone. So we're going to let it play. Let me take these.
21, 50%. 20, 50, 0%, 50, bar 1, beat 1, 50%, beat 2, 0%. F.
Okay, so it's still a bit clunky in the last half, and I think I'm going to do something. Now I know what I'm thinking I'm going to do. So I'm going to move these back a beat.
Bar 7 beat 2 0%.
So
21 3 select 4 items.
Whoa.
Twenty 22 selected. 4 item. 4 items.
Okay. Okay, let me
ripple off.
I'm going to delete one item, but I'm going to change ripple mode off so that all the items on the track stay in their place now. So here's what it sounds like in the second half. And something that you can also do, because obviously we're messing around with something that has harmony, so that we do have a melody line here, but there's harmonies in the chords that are being played in the low end. If you find that it's getting muddy in the low end or just too bright in the high end, at this point I would just recommend just using EQ, which I already have put on
the
FP2 track. And basically what I did for that is, because I don't really need the low end content, I put a high pass of 410 hertz. And something else that I like to do, which I mentioned at the beginning of this tip video, is panning. Panning definitely works in this kind of type of context, because you're creating one motion between the left and the right channel, because the melodies are starting at different times. Therefore, you're going to get a sense of motion between the two channels, as well as it widens the mix a bit, and it kind of prevents a buildup of frequencies going in the center. So that's my other tip that I would probably give as well. And overall, that's it. Hope you enjoy, and share, like, and subscribe, and keep safe and shalom as always. Peace.